there's also been a lot of reports and speculation lately about some ideas that he's potentially mulling over for whenever his time as king comes around. And one of them, unsurprisingly, I think, though, is about the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh and about elevating their position, but also potentially bringing in their children, Lady Louise and James, Earl of Wessex, and giving them working royal roles. What's your take? Obviously, it's not confirmed. This is just, this has been speculated, but what's your take on that idea?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you look at Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, they've been very much encouraged to go and live independent lives of the royal family, to earn their own living, not to be dependent on taxpayer-funded security, not to be a drain, I suppose, on the public purse. So it would be a step in a different direction. And I think, possibly it is being looked at. I mean, Princess Beatrice was there on Christmas Day. That was a sort of very visible presence for her. They're sort of welcoming her back into the royal fold. I know that both Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie are keen to do some royal work around their jobs and their home lives. And one wonders if perhaps that's a template that might work for Viscount Severn and Lady Louise Windsor. Because I think there's had to be a rethink at the palace because the shape of the royal family, the dynamic of the royal family has changed. We don't have Harry and Meghan over here who would have been doing so much of the work. Yes, the Duke of York has been ostracised and stripped of his royal duties. We've got Princess Anne, who's about to turn 75, but still carrying out hundreds of engagements a year. We've got the Edinburghs, we've got the Waleses, but, with the princess having gone through her own health journey, her workload has been reduced over the past year. So there's got to be contingency planning in place. There's got to be a plan B of well, we may have to look at something different. I think the king's whole idea of a slimmed down monarchy is something that is having to be redressed because of circumstance within the royal family.
I was about to say, I remember that was talked about for years prior to the late Queen's death. And you could understand why it was being spoken about then in the eyes of modern society, what the taxpayer is funding. But as you say, things have changed so dramatically for the royal family in recent years. It makes sense, I suppose, that we may see some new approaches in the future.
Yes, and I think there is a way of doing it, and it wouldn't necessarily have to be the case that Lady Louise and Viscount Severn would have to be full-time working royals. I think there's a compromise here. She's at university, he's at boarding school. They're clearly going to go on their own trajectories. I think when you look at Sophie and Edward, they're so down to earth in so many ways. They've shielded those children very deliberately from the spotlight, thrusting them into a life of royal duty. I don't think it's on the agenda, but I don't think it's completely a wild idea that they might be called upon on occasions, where appropriate, to support the monarchy.
Yeah, particularly because, as I understand, Lady Louise turned down the opportunity herself to have the HRH title. It's expected that her brother may do the same, but we'll see. I suppose anything could happen under a new reign. We're not sure. But speaking of Prince William still and what that might look like in the future, he's proven quite deft at sort of balancing the progressive issues but with the traditions of royalty and the monarchy. How do you think that all looks when he becomes king? Do you think there'll be any other big changes on the horizon, or will he be more likely to stick with what's in place?
Well, I think, when it comes to William, he recognises the importance of the past, of tradition, of pomp, of pageantry, of ceremony. That runs through his DNA. He believes absolutely in the monarchy. He's determined that it's not going to fizzle out with him, that he will have his reign and then George will have his reign and in it will continue after that. But I think he will bring his own touch to it. I think we've seen him do that in his role as the Prince of Wales. I mean, if you just an example is how he is developing social housing within the Duchy of Cornwall estate, for the first time. That's something that he's doing that's novel, that's groundbreaking, and that is important to him. So I think, in the same way that he's putting his own stamp, his own mark on being the Prince of Wales, he will also do that when his time comes to be king. So he's going to be a modern king, and he will do things differently to his father. Of course he will, in the same way that he is as Prince of Wales. But I think the foundation upon which the monarchy sits and depends won't change too much. I think that's been key to Charles's reign, and I think William knows it will be key to his reign when that time comes too.
Because the king is obviously also quite progressive on a lot of issues, environmentalism and climate change being a major one. But one royal we haven't spoken about for a few weeks, and I want to address that quickly, is Prince Andrew. After the scandals of last month, he's been largely out of the limelight. Do you think that we've seen the last of him in public life, or do you think, he's got the message?
Well, I think we probably have seen the last of him in terms of public life, certainly in terms of carrying out any duties on behalf of the royal family.
I felt like he was pictured a bit more visibly with the royal family over the last year or so. I felt like he was just a little bit more front and centre.
Well, he was, but you're right, Brontë, because he was very much centre at the memorial for King Constantine of Greece, and that had such a backlash in the media. And of course, this was when the king wasn't well and the princess was out of the picture, and it sort of looked as if the Duke of York seized upon that moment to sort of re-establish his authority as a family figure. I think his absence at Christmas was important, and as you say, hasn't been seen much since then. I think we'll probably see occasional pictures of him out riding in Windsor, but I think there is a feeling that he just needs to be kept at a distance to protect the reputation of the monarchy, both here in the UK, but, further seas internationally as well.
Absolutely. And on a lighter note, we've got to wish the Duchess of Edinburgh a very happy birthday. She turned 60 this week. And as you mentioned earlier, what a star player she has become in the royal family. So we know a lot about the Duchess, having had her in public life for so long, but you've been on the royal beat for so long. What's your impression of Sophie? What do you know about her?
Well, I think she's remarkably down to earth. I mean, we were talking earlier about how she's raised her children, without royal titles, away from the media spotlight. She was always a great favourite of the late Queen, who saw her not really as a daughter-in-law, but as a second daughter. She used to call her Mama. Sophie used to call the Queen Mama. They were incredibly close. And I think, the one thing that you see with Sophie is her loyalty and her duty and her absolute commitment to the crown. When the late Duke of Edinburgh died, she was there very much for the Queen as a rock for her. When Charles succeeded the Queen to the throne, she was very supportive of the king. And when he had to take some time out from royal duties, she was asked to represent him. And I think, she didn't take that title on, the Duchess of Edinburgh, lightly. It's a title that won't continue through to her children. That title will move from her to Princess Charlotte. And of course, Edward as Duke of Edinburgh. These are weighty titles. They take them very seriously. And I think we've seen in the last couple of years someone who is incredibly hardworking, who puts the spotlight on perhaps issues that we wouldn't normally associate with the royals, women who are victims of war and sexual abuse and rape and difficult subjects that the Duchess has really gone to highlight. She's been to Ukraine, she's been to some war-torn areas, she's done some really controversial work. She's on a mission to sort of improve vision around the world, particularly in poor countries in Africa, largely because her daughter suffered a vision impairment when she was younger. So she really takes on important causes and important work. And I think she does so without necessarily wanting to be celebrated for it, without wanting the recognition. She does it because she's got that platform and she wants to put the spotlight on work that's important to her.